know Hansen is sitting in New York City. Is that maybe somewhere you shouldn't open the window then?
The best option might then be to open the doors and make sure that the air you have in the apartment or wherever you are, to make sure that that air can circulate and blend out the CO2 levels at least. All
right, so now we know. And now the game has started, David. What are we seeing on the board?
So far, it's very early days, but it is the Sicilian defense. And for those avid followers of chessable, I know there's a lot of them out there. We know that Anish Giri is one of the biggest experts in the world on this opening, especially with the black pieces. He's published 2 video courses, one on the Sicilian Najdorf, actually the most popular opening chess, but also one on the Sicilian Dragon. So Eric Hansen with white, he's pausing. He's actually thinking already on just move 3. I'm surprised that he's surprised, to be honest, but maybe he's just trying to pick an opening where Anish Giri will be less familiar with the plans. And he doesn't go for the open Sicilian, trading some pawns off in the centre. He goes for maybe what's regarded as a quieter, simpler line. He gives a check with the white bishop, and that check has been blocked. So things now will pursue maybe a slower path, and we'll just see the players develop their pieces. White's king will come to safety soon, and the game will just maybe take a slower turn. At least for now.
And if you followed our show so far in the Airthings Masters, maybe you noticed that we changed colors to the bar. The bar is now orange, and the bar is saying 0.7 for Eric Hansen. Is it too early to pay attention to the bar?
Yes, is the short answer. So the evaluation bar, the orange bar, does show what the computer thinks of the position. Right now it's on white side, but it's not by much. 0.7 isn't a huge amount. If the bar gets a bit more excited, if it goes to +2, +3 for white, then we might take note. But right now it's too early to say. It depends on how effective both sides' plans are, especially as we enter the middle game. Especially once both kings get to safety. At the moment, it's very typical, this type of position. And Jovanka, maybe you have some stats on this, but I've seen this position before plenty of times.
And my database is saying the same. Like 1,689 games have been played. Actually, a little bit more than that. I was just looking at one particular line. So, you know, the pawn in the middle of the board is under attack by the black knight. And now Eric just has to make a choice. Is he going to defend that pawn with his queen by stepping it 1 square in front of the king? Or maybe is he going to take a slower approach and perhaps it will be the queen's pawn that steps up 1 square to defend it. Either way, the choice is in Eric's hand. Is he going to go for maximalist approach, and that is defend the pawn with the queen, or play a little bit more safely?
Yeah, and we did just see Eric there kind of stare down. He's kind of looking off to the side, looking down at the floor. That means he's just trying to remember what he studied in the past. He's just trying to kind of activate the recall mode in his brain. For sure, he's seen this position before, he's studied it before, and as we see there, after a bit of thought, after he'd remembered what he planned to do, he did just play a few moves very, very quickly, and Anish continues to do the same as well. Anish actually gaining some time from when he started the game. And yeah, Anish, actually, he's one player I've noticed has probably the worst CO2 levels out of all of the players. And it has affected him somehow this tournament so far. I know he's tweeted about it. He said, you know, there was a storm going on outside, maybe just some distractions, but he's in an opening he likes right now, and maybe that will just help him at the start of the day at least.
Yeah. And what I really like about Anish Giri is he is a man of his word. He's done a course on chessable on this particular opening called the Najdorf. And look at him, he's playing it. And this just shows that he believes in his openings and he believes in the lines that he's advocated.
All right.
Yeah, he's very principled. He's also one of the most hard-working players in the world. I don't know how he does it. He has a family, he's producing all these video courses for chessable, he's playing all the time. I mean, I thought there was only 24 hours in the day, but apparently not.
He probably has good air quality. You know, keeps him energetic throughout the entire day. And I'm curious, Joachim, because Eric Hansen, and interrupt me now, David, of course, if some big moves happen, but he is the player who's playing the earliest in the morning in Canada. Is that an advantage for him? Will air quality be better in the morning?
Probably because he spent the night in another room.
Yeah.
Unless he's in a hotel room or something like that, but that could definitely be beneficial.
So sort of air quality, it sort of resets after a long day, and then you leave the room where you maybe spend the whole day in home office or as a chess player, and then sort of the air quality resets and get better?
Well, it builds up. If you spend time in a room, the room quality, the air quality will slightly be worse over time. So for sure. But I think opening up a window in Canada in the morning would definitely give him a little bit of a boost in the morning.
Well, could be one of the reasons he's doing so fantastic in this tournament, Erik Hansen. Do you think he's feeling good about the opening here as well, David?
Yeah, I would be feeling great here with white. If you look at the center, white has these two very nice pawns in the middle of the board. This is one of the classic kind of strategies we teach players when they first learn the game. Just put your pawns in the center, bring your pieces out to support those pawns, to safe squares, centralized squares. And Erik, I've noticed, especially with white, he's been this his whole career. He's been very classically trained, and he just likes to keep things simple, gain the center, maybe start pressing from there. But the question is what to do next. White has done everything right so far. The computer evaluation is actually quite far on white's side already this early in the game. Yeah. But the question is what to do next. When do you push those white central pawns forward, which does involve some risk, or do you just build up first? And he chooses to centralize his rook. At some point, white needs to wake up those pieces on the left-hand side, which are still fast asleep, not really doing too much. And that's maybe why the computer's not such a fan of this last move. White's rook, it's on a decent square now, but maybe it was more urgent to improve the other pieces, which was still doing nothing at home. So early days still. I don't want to criticize either side's play, but I do slightly prefer white's position.
Okay. And I'm going to give you a little bit of extra information because we are actually following a game that Erik Hansen himself played against Andrei Volokitin, is a grandmaster from the Ukraine, in 2016. And he played this exact rook move. So in that game, in 2016, Erik actually lost.
With the black pieces?
With the white pieces.
With the white pieces, okay.
Yeah, with the white pieces. And so now he has an improvement in store. He wouldn't just be repeating a line that he's lost before.
Yeah, it's a sense of déjà vu for Erik Hansen. But it has cost him 4 minutes to get to this position, even though he has seen it before, even though he knows it pretty well. And he's mentioned this in an interview before. Time trouble is his biggest weakness. It's his Achilles heel. So it is slightly surprising to me that he spent so long already. He's still got plenty of time for the rest of the game. 11 minutes, you can get a lot of moves on the board, but it is slightly worrying that he's repeated an opening he's got a bad experience in the past, and it's cost him a few minutes to get here. Thinking again now, Erik. But maybe a bit nervous. Maybe it's the beginning of a day, a new day. He's doing so well in the tournament, he just wants to stabilize things. But yeah, that's difficult in chess. Sometimes you just have to trust yourself, just have to play quickly and save that time for later.
Yeah. And yeah, I agree with David. You know, as the day draws on, I think he's going to be feeling more and more nervous because it's just dawned on him. You know, he never expected to do so well. And now it's like, oh, touching distance with to getting into the knockout stages. And talking about emotions, I have to say, we love it when everyone at home gets excited and joins in the conversation, sends us questions and sends us their selfies. Yes. And we have, in the meantime, we do have a quick move, just a developing move from Erik. But we do have a few selfies to show you. And I'm Quite Divine says that they are rooting for Magnus Carlsen, as always. And they are watching from Cleveland, Ohio. And Feb's Avid is also incredibly excited that it's day 3 of the Champions Chess Tour. And he's watching from Jeddah, Saudi Arabia.
Wow.
So, yeah, if you want to join in the fun, ask us questions about chess, air quality, and tweet us your selfies. And you can do all these things by using the hashtag ChessChamps.
Very cool. Yeah, maybe some selfies, you know, with a window to see where in the world you're at, what kind of weather it is, where you're at. Will it always be better air quality outside? Not in the city, maybe?
No. There's some places in the world where the air pollution is quite high outdoors. That is true.
Okay. Couple of moves coming out here. Is Erik Hansen finally starting to play a little faster?
He has sped up slightly, Erik, but I'm not 100% sure whether he's happy with the developments in this game. Black is starting to advance. If you look at that left side of the board, Black has pushed a pawn there. Black's knight is slowly edging. It's getting ready to enter White's half of the board. And somehow it just feels like Anish Giri, he's more familiar with the plans. And this position is all about planning. Only one set of pawns have been traded so far. Everything else is still on the board. And that means no action yet, no tactics, no fireworks. It's just about placing your pieces on the best possible squares. And Anish, he's done that instantly. He's improving his pieces with every move. Erik, just a bit tentative, just maybe unsure still what to do with that white dark squared bishop. White's rook in the corner, still asleep. he needs to start waking those pieces up and doing something within the next few moves before Anish is able to properly activate and start challenging him in the center.
And talking about doing something, I have 3 games on the database. Michael Adams, Irina Bulmaga and Monika Sochko, these are all the grandmasters, have all played, no, they haven't all played, but they've all played different things. And the results haven't been so good, actually. 2 wins for black and 1 win for white. But the plan that catches my eye is the plan that Eric has just played now, which was actually employed by Michael Adams in his game against Lenier Dominguez in 2012 at the Olympiad. Maybe, David, you can slightly recall that game.
Yeah, I think I was sitting a couple of seats away from that game.
And he came up with this plan, was just relocating the bishop. The bishop has gone on a huge odyssey, but the idea is actually now to pick up the A-pawn and push it 1 more square and start disrupting Black's fortress there on the left side.
Yeah, so if you look at the bishop and queen, they're eyeing up these 2 pawns. Right now, the pawns are fortified, protecting each other. But as Jovanka mentions, if black is a bit slow, if black just kind of plays a move that doesn't really do too much, then white will push forward. And no matter what this pawn does now, there will be consequences. If you take white's pawn, for example, now the white bishop will pounce, and after a trade, white's queen will enter the action. And this is just a trade, still level material, but this black pawn now extremely weak. Ready to be picked off by white's knight, supported by the white rook and by the white queen later on. And this is a bit of a deep idea by Eric Hansen. Somehow, to me, it just shows that he has studied this position before, because the move he has just played, moving this bishop again as white for, I think it's the 4th time in the game already, moving this bishop, it's not obvious at all. And you only find a move like this one if you've studied similar ideas in the past. But again, that just kind of raises the question, why has he spent so much time on the clock if he knows the type of ideas he should be aiming for anyway? So white wants to play this pawn move next, and Anish Giri will maybe spend a couple of minutes trying to find a solution. He knows this move is coming, so he's just going to try and work out what to do in reply over the next couple of moves.
Do you think Eric is nervous, David, basically because he's now very aware that he is fighting in the top of the tournament and just coming into today feeling a little nervous?
Yeah, I've been there plenty of times myself. Often you start a tournament playing well, the momentum's on your side, nothing seems to go wrong, every bit of luck seems to go your way. But then as soon as you get so close to your kind of goal in the tournament, here for Eric, it's qualifying to the knockouts. He's only a couple of wins away now, but as soon as you get that goal in your eyesight, you get nervous, you get a bit tense, you stop taking the decisions you normally would make, you start playing safety first, you start spending a couple of extra minutes unnecessarily, and that could come back to haunt you. So, okay, meanwhile, Anish Giri does plant his black knight in white's half of the board, blocking the effect of the white bishop, of the white queen that we highlighted, and Eric just takes a time out to play another safety first move. This is a move we've mentioned before, Kaya, right? Just giving the white king some breathing space, so there'll be no checkmates on the back rank later. Luft, yes. Some air.
It's on that square they have the Airthings device on the chessboard, right? To measure the air.
So, David, I have a question. So is it easier for you that is experienced to see who is offensive, defensive? Because I see the bar in the top that goes back and forth.
Yeah. That's a very good question, actually. This type of position, we tend to make generalizations if we're just looking at it kind of from a neutral point of view. Here, I would say, for example, I like white because white has a nice pawn center in the middle of these 2 white pawns. They just control lots of squares. It's a bit like football. If you control the midfield, you often dictate the pace of the game. You can choose to play on the right, on the left, in the center. So that's personally why I prefer white's position. But I think the evaluation bar, it's just showing that neither player is playing perfect chess. But in this type of position, they're not making big mistakes either. Often there's 4 or 5 good moves in the position, and as a human, it's hard with only 10 minutes on the clock to choose between those 4 or 5 options. So, yeah, it's hard to criticize at the moment. The players, maybe they're not playing perfectly, or at least according to the computer, but they're just choosing plans that are easy to understand for humans. So neither side really on the attack or defense yet. Okay. They're just trying to choose plans that are logical, consistent, and maybe will guide them over the next 5 or 6 moves. So white, for example, lining up the light squared bishop with the queen. Black now just trying to bring his pieces all over to this left side of the board. And
so they're both a bit hesitant.
Definitely.
So we're waiting for the Braveheart moment where the clash starts.
That's my favorite moment, the Braveheart moment.
Yeah. Eric thinking again. And you guys, you are both, all 3 of you, you're all sort of geeks in your field, right? You're all super into your field. Chess, And air quality. How did you get into air quality? Why on earth are you an air quality expert?
Well, I mean, I have an engineering background, so that means that whatever topic becomes interesting, I want to dig into the details. So joining Airthings and the adventure over there, obviously the first thing one can do is to dig into Airthings, the indoor air quality and the impact it has on our lives and all that stuff.
Definitely. And I hear the ding. He's playing quite slowly, Erik Hansen, but the move comes here.
Yep. So every time I hear you say the word ding, I think of the Chinese player ding. But yeah, we heard that sound, which means a move has been made. And again, the evaluation bar, not sure that that's the best move, but it is quite illogical. It is quite a human move, bringing the white bishop out to an active square. And now black has just pushed a pawn there. And white's bishop was under attack, it has retreated. But there are pros and cons behind black's last pawn push. Black's king position now is slightly looser, slightly weaker than it previously was. That being said, I don't really like the position of white's bishop on the edge of the board. It could be very strong if it can put pressure against black's knight, but at the same time, the bishops here are probably more important than knights, so you don't really want to trade off, and that white bishop is not controlling any central squares. And now the computer really likes black. I'm not really sure why, but maybe there are some concrete reasons. Maybe the game will start to livening up now. Maybe that Braveheart moment is coming. Anish Giri needs to start taking some action against white's central pawns. Okay, just a slow move there, just controlling some squares. But yeah, this one is slowly bubbling. It will start to heat up soon.
Yeah, I agree. I have to say, I've once did this exact same bishop maneuver that Erik Hansen did, and it got criticised by all the grandmasters. Ooh. It was in the British Championships when I was a teenager, and they said, "Why is she wasting time with this bishop?" And I really didn't like this bishop sortie, and especially retreating to the edge of the board, because I was afraid that black could start simply playing on the dark squares and just try to lock that bishop out of the game.
Yeah, and just to demonstrate this, actually, maybe we can show Jovanka's point, because black here has just pushed his pawn forward. I think the move he wanted to play was to bring his knight to the edge of the board, and we normally say knights on the rim are dim. You don't want to put your knights on the side of the board, because then they only have one way back towards the centre. Knights are great in the middle of the board. But now the knight does threaten to jump into the dart square that Jovanka mentioned. This square, the f4 square, is no longer protected by white's bishop. White's bishop is simply offside. The reason Anish Giri pushed a pawn first is because actually this guy is undefended and attacked. So after the move he's played, pushing this pawn forward, there's a big question for Erik Hansen now. Does he leave this bishop on this square, maybe just improve another piece? I mentioned this rook asleep at home. It can centralize itself, but now black's knight will come to the edge of the board. This bishop is hitting thin air. It looks great, but it's actually hitting nothing on this diagonal, and now black actually has a massive threat in the position. If white, again, doesn't do too much, for example, just a nothing move, then the black knight will jump in. And look at these two pieces. They attack so many things. Here, this knight attacks the queen, attacks the bishop. If the queen moves, for example, then the other knight will start taking things, start taking some pawns. And these two knights combined, they have entered white's position, and they will cause some real damage. So actually, it's 2 or 3 moves long, but there is a small threat in the position that Erik Hansen must deal with. After this pawn push, he has to be really worried now about black's knight trying to do exactly what the other knight has done and enter white's half.
Okay. Knights on the rim are dim. We have a bunch of these rhymes in chess. And you mentioned at least one rhyme to me, Joachim, before we went on the show today. Rhymes and puns about air quality. You had one that was really nice.
Did I?
Yes, what was it?
The one that involved alcohol?
No? But that wasn't a rhyme, but that was an interesting fact, actually.
It was, right?
Yeah.
So do you want me to share it?
Yes.
Obviously. We do see that sometimes these chess players have, tendency of having the CO2 levels go up above 1,000 ppm. And I read a study once that, the cognitive impact of the CO2 levels going above 1,000 ppm is equivalent with drinking a pint of beer.
That's incredible.
Wow.
Which means that obviously if the CO2 levels go up above 1,000 ppm, you might have obviously a big impact on decision making, the ability to focus, and all stuff that we know is super important to win in chess.
Okay, so next time I make a mistake, next time I make a blunder, I can blame it on being drunk on the air.
Exactly.
But there's a kind of, I don't know whether there's any scientific basis to this, but I've heard that when you consume alcohol and play chess, your tactics actually get better. But
Ooh.
your strategical understanding goes to pieces.
Oh, really?
Yeah, you just cannot, you don't have the concentration to be able to sit there and work things out logically. You do, however, have the let's give up my
You
pieces.
have the creativity.
Yeah. But, well, I'm not sure it's creative. Maybe some kind
But you don't have that with CO2, that's for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, well,
Okay.
exactly. And yeah, imagine like parents sending their kids to school, and after an hour in a classroom, probably the CO2 level can get really, really bad, right?
Yep.
So it's basically like sending your kids to school with a pint of beer.
For breakfast, exactly.
Whew. Air quality, you guys.
It's super important,
Yeah.
because I have an Airthings device, a big fan in my office, and it's always telling me, giving me warnings. It's like, hey, your CO2 levels are too high, go open a window. And it's quite funny, actually, because usually the CO2 levels go high when my husband enters the room and starts giving me some opinions on some computer issues that I have. And I'm like, suddenly my phone will go off. And I'm like,
You're breathing too much. You're breathing too much.
Exactly. Open the window or leave.
Very harsh.
Yeah, but it makes a big difference. Fresh air.
Definitely. Well, in this game, the bar is now, I mean, it's been so much alive, this game, but now it's dead 0 draw, it says. What do you think, David?
Yeah, the computer is so cynical.
Yeah.
I guess chess with best play by both sides, perfect play, it is a draw. So 0.0 makes some sense, but it just shows that both sides, they have followed logical plans. The position, it's a bit of a standoff right now. Apart from Black's knight, which is in White's half, everything else by Black is kind of in his own camp. Everything for White is in his camp as well. And it's as if both lines of the army are staring at each other, just too scared to make that first move. And actually there we see Black's kind of fearless warrior retreat and take a step back into his half. So I'm not fully keen on that last move by Black. I guess the Black Knight wants to jump into a different square this time to harass White, White's rook maybe, to harass the central pawns from the side. But either way, yeah, very, very tense. It feels as if neither side really wants to take that next step, really has a clear-cut plan of action next.
Yeah, I agree with you, David. It's not necessarily clear what both sides are going to be doing next because, like you say, it's a clear battle over strategies. White is trying to do everything he can to maintain that impressive pawn centre in the middle of the board. Black, on the other hand, is going to try to destabilise it with his pieces. And he's going to try to provoke one of those pawns to come forward or simply take control of that open C-line. And as you can see, I think Eric is also struggling for a plan because now he's just reacting to Anish's last move. Anish had a potential threat with his knight, hopping into the board to attack the rook. And Eric just says, well, I'm going to retreat my bishop and cover that square.
Yeah. So just stopping the Black Knight coming in. And actually, if Anish Giri wanted to just tease his opponent here, he could bring the knight back where it came from, attacking this pawn. Now the White bishop would have to move so that the White queen could defend this pawn. The Black Knight could step back, again trying to get to this square, and we could see the position repeat itself. I don't think Anish Giri wants a draw here, especially with Black, especially with nearly 5 minutes extra on the clock. But then again, he could at least just tease Eric here, just say, OK, I'm going to bring the knight forward, and then I'm going to try something else. He's going to assert his dominance by saying, OK, I could repeat the position, go for a draw, but no, I'm the one who's going to play for the win. And actually, in the Russian school of chess, they always advise that. They say, repeat the position twice, not a third time, don't go for the draw, just show your opponent you're in control. It's a big psychological trick. So, yeah, right now, that's personally what I would have done. But, OK, Anish Giri chooses a different move. Instead of bringing the knight back where it came from, he pushes a pawn. So action is about to happen. Finally, there will be more trades. I'm not sure this is that great a move by Anish, but he's hoping, at least, that pawn takes pawn will be played, and now the Black Queen would activate and start attacking some pawns. Eric, though, does have the option in this position after this pawn push, instead of capturing, of bringing his knight to the edge of the board, attacking the Black Queen. And this would cause some real complications. The Black Queen would offer to trade off. Suddenly, the White Queen is hanging. And if we see an exchange, then whose knight is weaker? Whose knight is worse placed? I don't know, to be honest. But either way, neither knight makes a good impression here. And yeah, things are definitely starting to heat up after this last pawn move.
Ooh.
We're finally getting that action that we wanted for so long.
Definitely. And how fast does Eric Hansen have to play now with 4 minutes left, a little bit less than that in move 21?
it's worrying. It's not just that it's moved 21, which is still quite early in the game. It's more that nothing really has happened yet. Both sides, they've put their pieces on logical squares. And the top players, they know where the pieces belong. They know where they want to kind of position their army. So that stuff is normally automatic. But it's cost him most of his time already just to get to this very standard position. And the fireworks, which are about to happen, he's not going to have much time at all to calculate his way through them. So, yeah, I'm slightly worried. This move I'm not so keen on with black, but I'm slightly worried for Eric in practical terms because of the clock.
Yeah, I agree, David. You know, the fireworks are going to happen now in the next few moves, and he's left himself with so little time. This is when Blunderville starts to happen. Try and take it from me. This has been the story of my last 2 tournaments. Spent too much time trying to be perfect in the opening and maybe the early middle games. And then, of course, you know, around move 30 or so, the tempo starts to increase, and then, oh no, I blundered. Yeah. And the game just kind of changes completely.
I can actually relate to that as well. You know, for example, getting ready for these shows, planning these shows. I want to do it perfect, so I spend so much time, and then suddenly it's 2 hours until we go live, and I'm halfway through the show, and I just don't have time. It's about being too perfect, and you know, when you start planning stuff.
Yeah, and actually, we mentioned the 7 Deadly Chess Sins, the book by Jonathan Rowson. That is a sin, perfectionism.
Is it?
You can't be too perfect in chess. There's no such thing as keeping control for an entire game, especially at this level. Your opponents are too good to let you keep that control. So at some point, things will get messy. They will get complicated, and things got messy now on the board. We did actually see that variation that I highlighted with the queens coming down, getting traded off for each other, and White's knight was attacked on the edge of the board. It's come in, but now Eric has 2 minutes and a bit of a shaky position. White's knight might have just trapped itself in Black's camp. It's getting adventurous, it's getting aggressive, that White knight attacking Black's rook, but it's a lone ranger. It has no support. And if Anish Giri chooses the correct continuation now, actually I see a few tempting moves, then I think White's knight might be in big trouble. What has Anish played? Wow, he's just left his rook attacked. This is really clever. We have to show it on the board. Yeah, perfectionism for Eric, it didn't pay off because I think he's in trouble. Right now, actually, in this position, if we just backtrack 1 move, this rook was attacked. It's human nature. If you see your idea, you think, OK, my opponent has to react to it. But sometimes you forget your opponent has threats as well. So in answer to this attack, there is a counterattack. The rook didn't move. Black just stepped a pawn forward 1 square. And now, if the rook is captured, Black will say, OK, I don't care about this knight yet. I'm going to flick in pawn takes bishop first. And after the pawn is recaptured, because it's attacking White's rook, now the knight will be taken. And if we do a quick count, Black actually has a bishop and a knight for a rook. And if we do a bit of maths there, a knight and bishop worth 6, a rook worth 5, 2 pieces as well, better than 1, and Black has the advantage. So Eric now in a bit of trouble. Now, if he has to move this bishop, for example, then the rooks will come off, and at the very end, White will lose a pawn for free. So he's about to lose material, Eric Hansen.
And look at the clock. It's ticking down to 1.5 minutes. What's going to happen with the air around Eric Hansen now that he starts sweating, maybe breathing faster? Will it change the air around him as well?
Absolutely. I mean, him breathing faster is going to produce more CO2. That's for sure. Maybe his body heat, will impact the overall thermal comfort. So there's stuff happening in that room, that's for sure.
He actually looks kind of calm, though. But there's drama on the board, David.
There's a lot of drama on the board. As we mentioned, White's knight was doomed. That transition actually happened. The knight grabbed the black rook, the white bishop fell. White's knight decided to flick in a check first, but it has just dropped off the board. So it's that material imbalance that I mentioned. White actually has an extra pawn now, so it's a rook and a pawn for Black's bishop and knight. But in general, the pieces are better. Black's bishop and knight combined will overpower one of the white rooks.
Yeah.
And, OK, Eric steps forward a pawn that was just attacked in the centre. He's trying to complicate things now because long-term, he's just lost. Black is winning long-term. But short-term, maybe White has some chances. And now he's just trying to make Anish a bit confused with this pawn push. He's attacking one of the black knights, attacking one of the black pawns. It feels like Anish, with 8 minutes, though, should be able to re-establish control. And then his extra pieces will decide the game. So looking very difficult for Eric Hansen. And yeah, not much to say about his position. I don't think he will save this one if Anish just captures a pawn in the centre, maybe centralises the black knight that's under attack as well at some point, and slowly but surely the black pieces will start to take over. White's rooks, they're just not combined, and even if one of the white rooks comes up the board to try and check the black king, at the very best, it's just going to get traded off.
Yeah, the rooks just don't have the mobility to be powerful. I mean, the rooks really want to have to the power to traverse the board horizontally. I did the wrong movement there. Horizontally and vertically as well, and especially horizontally, because there it can switch between the two flanks. And if you see here, well, he can't do that. It's only going to go one way. And Eric, really, to his credit, he's kind of in hustle mode. He's trying to create those complications because he knows ultimately if he lets Anish consolidate, then he's going to lose.
Yeah, and anyone who's watched Eric online, he's got a huge online following as a streamer. But anyone who's seen his YouTube channel, his videos, knows that he's a fighter. Actually, whenever he wins a game, he has this kind of Mortal Kombat signal at the end where it's like, KO, game over. So he will fight to the bitter end. And actually, yesterday as well, he had some bad positions, but he saved them. So, yeah, I think black should be winning with perfect play, but humans are not perfect, especially with no time on it.
And it doesn't seem that Anish made the perfect move there. The bar reacted a little bit.
Yeah, I think maybe there was a better square for black's knight. He went for the most human move, but now Eric getting active with one of the white rooks. And we mentioned that was the key. And Jovanka mentioned the rooks. If they can't find good squares, it's just going to be no chance for white. But he's trying at least to activate one piece. And black's pawn now, next to the white rook, is under fire. Yeah, still some chances. I like Eric's last move, at least. And Anish, meanwhile, maybe not feeling 100% confident just because he's had such a difficult tournament so far. And winning a one position, they do say that's the hardest thing in chess. It's easy to build it up. It's easy to trick your opponent sometimes, but putting the finishing touches on, putting the ball in the back of the net, you do get nervous sometimes, and your opponent always has defensive tricks.
Well, Anish, he really, upped his game in online rapid chess last year, becoming one of the best players in the tour. But what is he? He is, just about inside top 8 before the start of today. What has he struggled a little bit with this tournament?
Consistency in a way, actually. Especially on day one, he wasn't as solid as he usually is. Anish Giri, when we think of him, I mean, some people make jokes about draws, but it just shows that he nearly never loses. Yeah. He's very resourceful. He's a fighter himself. He's very well prepared in the opening, very well trained, very disciplined as well. But it feels like on day one, he lost a bit of discipline. He was taking risks and they were backfiring, maybe because of the new format of the tour. But yesterday, he did stabilize a bit and play a bit better. So, yeah, he's just a great player. I mean, he barely has any weaknesses to his game. But, yeah, so far, just not quite at his best.
Well, a win here would be great news for Anish Giri. Eric Hansen, he is in third place before the start of today. He can afford a loss, but obviously 1 point and a draw is what he wants to win. But is that possible still for him, or what kind of results can be possible in this game now?
Well, there's still plenty of opportunity for both sides to go wrong. I mean, this is a very imbalanced position. It's a rook and a pawn against two minor pieces. And so far, in this current position, you can actually see that Eric's rook is attacking the pawn. And so that's the immediate question. And it's not particularly easy for Anish to actually defend that pawn in a safe way. I mean, if he defends it with his bishop, well, he'll have to put the bishop on the edge of the board. And also take a look at the knights. There's two pieces there on the edge, and we're never big fans of those pieces with no squares.
Exactly. Black still needs at least 2 or 3 moves to re-centralize these pieces later. Also, black has to be a bit careful of the dark squares. This bishop is offside, not doing too much. It's actually staring at its own pawn, so it's blocked in right now. But if you're careless as black, it could come to life. For example, there are some annoying checks that could happen at some point. This looks like a nasty skewer, checking the king, and if the king moves, then the rook will drop off behind it. But at the moment, it's okay for black, because black would be able to block this attack. And that's why Eric has played his last move. I was about to suggest it. This pawn push forward, it has a sneaky idea in mind, and that is simply, if black does nothing, if black kind of centralizes the knight, then now white would be winning. White would turn things around completely with a check. And this skewer now is super effective because this pawn push would not effectively block. White could just capture it, and after a trade, again, check, and black's rook would fall off. So nasty, nasty threat in the position. Eric Hansen, very sneaky now. With this pawn push, he's not just solidifying his center, he's creating this idea of a check. And that's not actually easy for Anish to deal with. Maybe he just has to get his king out of the eye line of that bishop, get it onto a light square where it will be safe. For example, retreating, and if the white bishop does now move, okay, he's gone for a different option, but now I was going to say he can move the rook. He chooses the kind of reverse idea. He moves the rook first out of the way. So in this position, will we see a rook trade after the rook comes across? No, Eric gives a check, and now the black king will simply move. And if these rooks disappear off the board, I think black will be much happier because this, after all, is white's best piece.
Okay. Well, Levon Aronian, great start to the day for him, winning his first game against Jan-Christoph Duda. Duda really struggling so far in the Airthings Masters. Anish Giri fighting for a win in his first game of today against Eric Hansen. Clock ticking for him as well now. Is it important now for Anish to keep the speed up, to keep that time advantage?
I think ideally he would like to, because Eric Hansen is one of the best players in the world actually at what we call bullet chess, where both sides start with just 1 minute on the clock.
Ooh.
He is so fast, so tricky. He's got great instincts, Eric Hansen. So it would just become a lottery. It would just become very random if both sides have less than 1 minute. I think actually I would favour Eric, if anything, if it's just about the speed. But while Anish has a few minutes more, he will be pretty confident.
Yeah, 15 seconds though for Eric Hansen. This is getting intense.
Yeah, it is getting intense because Eric is certainly on the back foot as
And
well.
he has to make a move.
Yeah,
5 seconds.
The problem is he can't choose those simple moves. And
2 seconds.
I think he's just, what?
Okay.
Wow, 2 seconds and he's just given up his rook for a knight and pawn.
That's
and
just desperation, right?
Yeah, that's desperation. Right now, if we do a quick count, black has an extra knight just for 2 white pawns. Yes, the knight isn't great right now, but if it does centralize itself, if it does find an outpost later, attacking some of the white pawns, actually it can do that now. The knight can re-centralize itself. Yeah, it's going to far outweigh those white pawns.
I just got one thing that Anish has to be absolutely careful. He must not take his rook off the bottom row. If he lifts that rook and moves it anywhere other than the 8th row, then there is going to be something that we call the opera mate. It was based on a story from actually something that happened to a legendary player in the 18th century, Paul Morphy. He beat the Duke of Brunswick in the 18th century at the opera. So we call this checkmate the opera mate. So don't fall into it.
Yeah, this is a very common checkmating pattern. Anish will definitely not fall for it, but this is one to remember at home because it happened to me, I remember, when I was very young in a few of my first tournaments. So, yeah, right now, in the current position, the black rook is tied down to defend this back rank to prevent that from happening. And meanwhile, Anish Giri does centralize his knight, attacking some of these pawns. And actually, this pawn does step forward, so offering up a bit of bait. Do you take this pawn, but re-sideline your knight again? It looks perfectly fine to me, to be honest. You can get greedy here, but greed isn't always good. And the other alternative would be to centralize the knight, attacking the white rook. And if the white rook goes back, then suddenly the black bishop can re-enter the game. You could team up against this pawn with your knight, your bishop, and suddenly, yeah, the knight can also dance back and attack this bishop. It feels like black's pieces are starting to coordinate. And yeah, once that happens, I think Anish will win.
Yeah. But I'm curious, will he grab the pawn?
Greed or not greed?
Will he find that pawn irresistible? And the answer is no. He decides to put his knight in the center and go for the plan that David highlighted, which looked really quite ruthless.
Yep, and that was another of the 7 deadly chess sins, materialism, greed. Sometimes there are more important factors than material, than just mere pawns on the side of the board. And yeah, white's rook is under fire. 2 seconds again by Eric. Oh, he made the move with 2 seconds left on his clock. Real brinksmanship by Hansen. And I mean, he's so calm. Look at him, just so focused, despite having 2 seconds left. I mean, I'm in time trouble all the time, but I still have my heart beating way too fast when I'm down under 5 seconds. And okay, he does retreat his rook.
I mean, it looks like it is Anish Giri who's in time trouble. Look at him. He's, fidgety and his face seems a little red and he seems to be a little nervous.
Maybe it's the CO2 levels
Slowly increasing that pint of beer.
Yeah, exactly. He's getting drunk, Anish Giri.
Yeah, actually, I saw at the beginning of play, his CO2 levels were about 750.
Oh, no, see.
And they're over 1,000, so...
Oh, that's bad news.
He's intoxicated.
He needs to hurry up.
That's actually a red ring around the CO2 level, isn't it? That's bad news for Anish Giri.
And one thing I noticed on last season of the tour, okay, the knight just manoeuvring around now, attacking some pawns. One thing I noticed last season is that Anish struggled in tournaments when his CO2 levels were high. The one tournament he won, the Magnus Carlsen Invitational, actually he had great CO2 levels for most of it. So maybe it's coincidence, maybe not. I don't know.
Probably not, right?
Yeah, it certainly affects him, I noticed, towards the end of most days. Often he starts quite well, but then can be a struggle to maintain his form.
Yeah,
I think it's a key point. Bad air quality affects your endurance and your ability. Because remember, these are long tournaments, these are long days. You know, 4 games of high quality and high emotion.
Yeah.
Big stakes as well. So, yeah, the nerves are going to get to him and bad air quality.
Yeah, meanwhile, things have taken a turn for the worst on the board as well for Erik Hansen. A pawn has dropped. So the opera checkmate that Jovanka highlighted, that is off the table. It's gone. Look at the black knight just blocking the white rook. It's also supported by black's bishop. Everything's teamed up for black. The black bishop supporting the black knight, which just cuts the board in half in a way, stops any of white's play. And now this black pawn that has pushed, it's running down the board. Black is just a piece up. And have we seen Erik Hansen resign? He's just given up. It's a difficult position, but a bit too early. Anish Giri, though, takes the win.